Although this audio was generated with the help of AI tools, the content you are about to listen to accurately reflects the current status of the David Cards project.
You know, I stumbled across something kind of interesting recently. It's called David Cards.
David Cards.
Yeah, David Cards. And no, it's not like, a magic trick or something,
Right.
though it does feel a bit magical. It's a tool,
Oh.
a deck of cards
Huh.
that's designed to spark conversations, get people talking
Interesting.
about Jewish identity and the relationship with Israel.
Wow.
So we're diving into some pretty fascinating territory with this deep dive.
Yeah. No, it's more relevant than ever, wouldn't you say? I mean, this whole idea of identity history, especially for younger generations, they're wrestling with these really big questions about who they are in the world, and their heritage is such a big part of that.
Absolutely. And, and these questions are definitely out there swirling around.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that over 4,000 of these David card sets have already been distributed.
Wow.
Mostly in the U.S. and Israel. And it's not just, synagogues using them. It's summer camps. They even talk of a family version in the works.
Wow. That's really interesting.
So clearly something's resonating here.
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah. It speaks to this need for a space to explore what can often be really sensitive and complex topics. And these cards offer a structured way to do that.
Okay, so let's unpack these cards a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, what are the big, core questions
Yeah.
that they're trying to get people thinking about?
Well, at their heart, the cards revolve around three fundamental questions.
Okay.
How do you view your Jewish identity today? What is your relationship with Israel? And how do you view your personal connection to other Jews around the world?
Wow. Okay, so three pretty direct, straight to the point questions there.
Yeah.
And they're not just relying on, a bunch of text on these cards to get these conversations going.
Right.
They actually use visuals, which I have to say I'm pretty intrigued by.
Interesting.
Visuals when we're talking about something like identity. Tell me more.
Well, each card uses an image of the Star of David, but they're presented in ways that evoke a whole range of emotions and associations. And visuals, they bypass our intellectual defenses and they tap directly into our feelings.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about identity and deeply held beliefs, that's really key.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how visuals can be so powerful, especially with something like this.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you have these fancy concepts. And they don't always translate into real-world impact.
Right.
So tell me, are these cards actually working? Are they sparking these meaningful conversations?
It seems so, yeah. The anecdotal evidence is pretty compelling. For example, there's a story about a rabbi from a Reform synagogue.
Yeah, this one really stood out to me in the research.
Yeah.
He saw something pretty incredible, didn't he?
Yeah, he found that the cards helped people in his congregation, his community, to feel more comfortable expressing their views on Israel, and in many cases for the very first time.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Especially with how much debate there is even within the Jewish community.
Exactly.
Did he talk about what made it so impactful, those conversations?
He talked about how the cards help people connect with their own personal experience and beliefs rather than getting stuck in political arguments.
Right, so it becomes more about personal reflection.
Exactly.
And less about...
Yeah, less about rhetoric and debate.
Yeah.
More about dialogue.
Right.
And my understanding is that these conversations didn't stop at the synagogue. They continued in people's homes and workplaces, even online.
Right. It's that ripple effect.
That's exactly.
When you have a shared experience, it kind of expands outwards.
It's true.
That's really interesting. And it wasn't just, this rabbi. The material also mentioned a Jewish agency emissary.
Right.
Who was working with college students.
Yeah, a whole different generation.
Completely different generation.
Yeah.
Dealing with identity in a totally different way.
For sure.
What was their experience like?
This particular emissary was struck by how the cards helped the students, many of whom were really on their own journeys of self-discovery, to open up in ways that they hadn't before about their Jewish identities.
Huge.
They were connecting, they were sharing their struggles and their questions, even their hopes for the future.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That's that impact.
Right.
It's so interesting how something, even as simple as these cards,
Yeah.
can create a space for people to be vulnerable and open.
I think that's the power of it, yeah.
It makes me think about all those studies about storytelling and shared narratives and how that can really build empathy and understanding.
Yeah, our brains are hardwired for that.
Exactly.
We're visual creatures, we connect through stories.
So from, your expert perspective then,
Hmm.
what is it about these David cards that makes them so effective?
Well, I think it's a few things. First, the cards themselves provide a framework, a structure
Right.
for difficult conversations.
The guardrails almost.
Exactly, guardrails. So
Yeah.
you can explore these sensitive topics safely.
Yeah.
And then there's the power of those visual prompts, which we talked about. It's like
Yeah.
a universal language that transcends words.
Mm-hmm.
And importantly, I think, these cards don't present one right way to be Jewish.
Yes, I love that.
Right.
It's not about telling people this is how you should think or feel.
Exactly. And that's so important, especially for younger generations, I think.
For sure.
Because they need that validation that there are many ways to experience and connect with their identity.
Absolutely. It's about that feeling of belonging.
Exactly.
Even if you have different opinions, different life experiences.
For sure.
And speaking of reaching a wider audience, they've also launched a poster version of these cards.
They have, yeah. Imagine those same powerful visuals, but blown up to poster size,
Wow.
right?
Oh,
For use in bigger groups.
like a presentation or something?
Exactly. Or even just displayed in a gallery-style setting.
So you're not just having like an intimate conversation anymore.
Yeah.
It could be a whole auditorium full of people.
Exactly. And that speaks to the creator's commitment to inclusivity, to making these conversations accessible to everyone.
Which actually leads me to another point that I thought was really interesting. This isn't just some static deck of cards.
Right.
It's constantly being updated.
Yeah, they're committed to staying relevant.
Yeah. And they're incorporating these illustrations that are connected to current events.
It's true.
Like October 7th, like the rise in anti-Semitism around the world.
It keeps the conversation grounded in the reality of what it means to be Jewish today.
Exactly. And it acknowledges the diversity of the Jewish experience, the good and the bad.
The joys and the sorrows.
Yeah, exactly. The triumphs and the tragedies
All of it.
that have shaped Jewish identity over,
For
centuries.
thousands of years, yeah.
It's like they're saying, this is our story. This is who we are.
Yeah.
Now you take it and figure out where you fit in.
Exactly. And I think that's such a powerful message for especially, younger generations who might be feeling a little lost
Yeah.
when it comes to their heritage.
Right. Like, where do I belong?
Exactly. It can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah.
But these cards offer this way to engage with their heritage on their own terms.
Yeah, in a way that feels relevant to their lives.
Exactly.
It makes me think about those big questions like, who am I? We all ask ourselves that at some point.
At some point. Yeah.
And it's not always an easy question to answer,
Not at all.
especially I think when you're talking about something as complex as Jewish identity
Right.
in the world today.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
And that's what these David cards really highlight, I think. They're not about easy answers
Right.
or telling you what to think.
It's about the process, the conversation.
Exactly. They give you a starting point,
Right.
a way to navigate this really complex terrain.
Like a compass almost.
Yeah, I like that, a compass, because it doesn't tell you where to go. It just helps you figure out your own direction.
And that direction might look different for everybody.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
That's more than, okay, that's the point.
It's about embracing that diversity. Right.
For sure.
The different ways of being Jewish.
Yeah.
Of connecting with your identity.
Yeah. And I think that's something we could all learn from.
I agree. I think this has been a really, really insightful deep dive.
Yeah, it's great to think about these things.
And you know what? You've really hit on something important.
What's that?
The importance of embracing those open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm.
The things that don't have easy answers.
Right, because that's where the real learning happens.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up
Right.
in trying to find the right answer.
Yeah, especially in today's world,
Oh, for sure.
where everything's about quick fixes and easy solutions.
But the real understanding, the real connection comes from.
From wrestling with those tough questions.
Yeah.
From being open to different perspectives.
Exactly.
Even if it makes you uncomfortable sometimes.
It's amazing to me, though, how David cards, they're not just like conversation starters, They actually get people doing creative stuff, too.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
So there was this one idea, I think it was in the handbook, where you have groups and they each get like 5 cards and they have to use them to actually create a story.
Okay, interesting.
And the prompts are really thought-provoking, like, our Israel is, or the perfect trip to Israel would be like. I can just imagine the conversations that would come out of that.
Yeah, it's taking it to a whole other level, isn't it? It's not just about your own individual thoughts anymore, but actually collaborating and creating something new as a group. That's really powerful.
Right. And it gets even better. They also suggest having people create their own illustrations based on the cards or even videos.
Wow.
Because like David cards are this springboard that can launch you into like endless possibilities for deeper engagement.
But that's where real learning happens, I think, when you go from just taking in information to actually creating something yourself. The Educator's Handbook talks about this thing called radical listening. Have you heard of that?
I haven't. No. What is that?
So it's this idea of really, truly trying to understand where someone else is coming from, even, or maybe especially, when their views are different from yours, and coming to the conversation with an open mind without judging. It's tough, but so important, especially when you're talking about, something as complex as Israel. It's about embracing the discomfort and being okay with the fact that there's so many different perspectives. And it seems like David Cards, they give you this safe space to do that.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. If you were creating a card for David Cards, what image would you choose to represent your own personal connection with your Jewish identity, or even with Israel? Let that question simmer for a bit and let the conversation continue.